Well, welcome to today's Fireside Chat with BTCS. I'm your host, John Roy. I cover technology here at Water Tower Research. And today I'm joined by the CEO, it's Charles Allen of BTCS, like I said. So I should mention that the company's safe harbor statements are available on their website. You guys can all read those. And also that this Fireside Chat may not be reproduced or written transcript distributed without the express written consent of Water Tower Research. Charles, welcome. How you doing?
Good to be here, John. Thanks for taking the time.
Hey, excellent, excellent. So, Charles, just to get us going, why don't you give us a quick overview of BTCS, and what you guys are really trying to do?
So BTCS stands for Blockchain Technology Consensus Solutions, which I know is a mouthful, but we are basically the oldest public company in the crypto space. We're focused on providing investors exposure to Ethereum via a high revenue growth company. So we are a a blockchain infrastructure company and a digital asset treasury company utilizing a unique uh, TradFi and DeFi flywheel to raise capital and drive, appreciation for investors.
Great. Now, Ethereum, I believe there's some news recently on Ethereum, layer two stuff with Swift. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe if you could give us an update of what's going on with the whole Ethereum world.
So I mean, look, in the last, I would say 9 months or 10 months, Ethereum's been doing great, primarily with the shift in the administration and regulation. But there's a lot of other things that are really helping. I mean, obviously the price, we're approaching all-time highs around 4,700. I think the all-time high was 4,800. But there's a lot of institutional adoption, whether that's through other digital asset treasury plays like Bitminer or SharpLink, but also through Fidelity's investing. There's a lot of large institutions that are deploying capital on Ethereum, and then you have to ask the question of why. So it really is a function of utility. So there's a lot of stable coins that are built on Ethereum, about 60%, and there's a lot of really positive events going on. The tokenization of stock on Ethereum is starting to happen. So when you look at these, the utility of the blockchain is actually, it's starting to come to reality. And I know we've been waiting like 10 years for this, but that reality is, what the internet did, which was the digitization of information, blockchains can do with the tokenization and global movement of assets on a worldwide basis without trusted third parties. And I think we're just starting to see um, that start. And so it's really an exciting time, and that's kind of starting to get reflected in the price.
Right. Yeah, I know the Genius Act in the past, not too long ago, was a key element of at least giving a lot of people that seem to be on the sideline the push to say, okay, we need to look at this for real. Are you really seeing a lot more adoption in that way?
I think there is. You're seeing a lot more capital, and so you tend to see first capital comes in, then solutions are built, and then you see that adoption. So the capital wasn't even flowing historically. Now the capital is flowing. We're seeing the real world use case adoptions kind of in a very quick pace now that the government isn't trying to put you out of business for doing these things. And so I think that's huge. As far as Ethereum goes, compared to some of the other blockchains, we've got the Fusaka upgrade coming, which it should really drive more decentralization, lower cost, and increased throughput. I'll kind of leave it at that without getting into the technicals. But that's another catalyst for Ethereum that we're pretty excited about in terms of driving adoption and hopefully price appreciation.
Now, is that catalyst going to come pretty soon? Is that next 6 months-ish?
Yeah, next 6 months. I mean, it's I believe it's slated for the end of sometime in December. I forget the exact date off the top of my head, but we'll see. That assumes the test net goes okay. So I would think by the end of the year. If not, it could be, Q1 next year.
Great. So let's talk about BTCS specifically. What do you guys have going on? What's kind of where are you guys making progress? What's been going on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I can't talk about because that'll show up in our uh, Q3 report. What I will say is, if you look at the company historically, and I'd say over the last couple of years, we were kind of I wouldn't say treading water. We were actively building solutions. We were developing software, but our market cap was kind of stuck in the 25 to $40 million range, and we hadn't grown our assets. And so now, over the last really Q3, we've seen a huge increase in our assets. We've got over 70,000 ETH. as well as, we're seeing a big bump in revenue. And a lot of this is recent, which is great because it isn't in the market yet. We've reported Q2. A lot of our fundraising came in Q3. And so that capital was deployed. And even in Q3, we won't fully see the results of what we've deployed. That'll really be Q4 because the money came in throughout the period. So in terms of, high level, I can't really disclose too much except we're excited about Q3 results. We're, we have a buyback in place. I can't really say how much we bought back, but it was, it's great. Our stock is back up now. It's, around $6, but it was, we were equally excited when you're doing a buyback when it's low to be able to buy it, cheap because it's effectively, buying Ethereum at a discount. So those are the kind of I know those aren't material updates because I can't really say much beyond that, but that's kind of, where we are.
No, that's great. That's perfect. Obviously, there's only so much you can really say publicly. Um, with regard to that, though, you versus the other Ethereum players, can you give us, at least from your standpoint, what do you view as your differentiation? What makes you different than the other players that are in the market?
So right now, I think the biggest differentiator is we've got active operations. And so most of the other players pivoted into, that are focused on Ethereum and even the other digital asset treasury tokens that are focused on other ones. Um, their focus is on just accumulating tokens. We've been at this 5 years, so if you want just basic one-to-one, let's say ETH exposure, go buy an ETF, and those may have staking soon as well. If you want ETH plus staking, you can buy another digital asset treasury. If you want ETH plus staking without paying fees to a third party, that's kind of where we come into play. And then if you want beyond that, operations that can drive scalable revenue growth beyond just the yield on staking ETH, I think that's where we're looking to excel. So we have our block building business, which was 80% of our revenue in Q2. And we have our, staking, which we do all the operations ourselves. So that is substantially, we're doing substantially better than we would if we were going to a third party staking provider. And we're looking at other ways to drive scalable revenue within the Ethereum ecosystem. And so I can't really say much more than that, but I think that's the differentiating factor now. I think over time, we'll see others focus on revenue generating and profit generating operations beyond just, hey, I'm going to buy this token and hold it.
Right. Well, I've heard it described as a DApp plus plus. I'm sure there's going to be
Exactly. That's the plus plus is the
it's a plus plus, then plus plus, then et cetera. Um, do you see consolidation possibly coming to the market over the next 2 years, maybe? I don't know.
It's possible. I think, there's a lot of misconceptions on DATs that like, oh, if the price drops, they'll be forced to sell, and it's going to create some spiral. And I don't buy into that theory. I think if a DAT's trading below its net asset value, they're going to look for other ways to generate revenue or do something else. Theoretically, they could get bought out, but I think the fact that they would have to sell to which would create selling pressure and drive the price down. Maybe in Bitcoin that could happen because MicroStrategy is so big and there's no revenue generating operations apart from their software business, which is dwarfed by the crypto holdings, and they have so much debt, right? So they've got all this debt and interest payments. For most of the ones in Ethereum, I think like BTCS, we're the only one that's using leverage. And we're using Aave, which is, perpetual debt. We don't have to pay it back as long as the loan is healthy. It's not, there's no bullet payment in, 2 or 3 years.
Right. Maybe you could give us a little color into Aave. I know it's an interesting approach in terms of loaning and borrowing things. That would be great.
Yeah, no, and I'd say obviously one of my favorite um, projects or platforms that's built on Ethereum. And so imagine if you had a bank and you just got rid of all the brick and mortar and all the people. So you got rid of all the locations and you eliminated effectively all the people, you would have huge cost savings. So then the question is, well, how would that bank operate? And it says, well, what if you took that bank and all a loan officer does is assess risk, right? And if you want to get a mortgage on your house, they're going to make you do, tons of paperwork. They're going to do background checks, title insurance checks, like all of this. And then they'll take your they'll loan you capital that they've borrowed from other people and make a spread. So what Aave does is just automate that whole process. So we can deploy our ETH, we deposit as collateral, and we're able to borrow against it. And as long as the loan is over collateralized and healthy, we're not at risk. And so we borrowed north of $50 million by putting up collateral, and the collateral earns interest. So we're earning interest while we have our in ETH while we borrow US dollar stable coins. And so then we're able to take those stable coins and put them to work. So we actually end up with um, about, I think it's a 42% increase in Ethereum exposure by taking on the leverage, and we still have, a net positive return with that leverage on that position. So that's it's worked out really well so far. And I think we're the only public company doing this at this point.
Really? So that's one of the pluses in the plus plus, I guess.
Yeah, I mean our average price of ETH is below 4,000, and we did a lot of that on leverage. So if we're up, you know, 40% on ETH, I'm just using an example, and it costs us, and that's in, a 3 or 4 month period, and it costs us 6% a year, which we don't have to, you know, make the payments. It just accrues. It's an amazing deal.
Right. I have one kind of more broad question. Um, Other markets, other jurisdictions, are they really at a big advantage to the U.S. coming from behind, or has the U.S. kind of caught up with genius in your thinking?
Um, I'd say a lot of development went offshore. But I think everything's going to come back. There's just so much capital in the US that I don't think we've lost the race. I mean, had we continued down the same path and just continued to force innovation offshore, I think we would be in a bad position. But there are a lot of innovative companies that have been building solutions within the blockchain ecosystem here that have just been like, well, waiting, hoping, true believers like the team at BTCS that this is where the future is going, and so I don't think we're terribly behind. I'd say we're in a solid position as a country in terms of blockchain technology.
Oh, great. Well, maybe as a final question, I know you've given us some of the view into the third quarter a little bit in terms of what you can say. Maybe if you take a step back, take a broader view, what's going on multi-year? Yeah, international expansion, maybe not so much. More of the same, more features. Kind of, what's your thinking as CEO?
So I think my goal is to, first and foremost, I want to build a $1 billion company. Um, Second to that is like, how do we do that? And I want to do that through share price appreciation as opposed to just dilution. Though we will, raise capital as needed and to expand if it's advantageous. And so that's kind of the main goal. And the question is, how do we achieve that goal? And I think right now it's, let's drive scalable revenue growth. Right now, that's block building and validation, and try to do those two things in the best way we possibly can. And then the third, we're looking at alternative ways to drive revenue within the DeFi ecosystem. And I can't really say much more beyond that, but it would be a kind of a three-prong approach to um, driving revenue and profit.
Great. Well, Charles, I think we're going to need to leave it there. I appreciate you spending time with me in this fireside chat. And we want to thank everyone. And if you want to learn more, you can go to BTCS's website, or you could look at our research at www.watertowerresearch.com on BTCS. We have a fair number of reports, previous fireside chats with Charles, etc. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. The views expressed in this fireside chat may not necessarily reflect the views of Water Tower Research LLC and are provided for informational purposes only. This fireside chat may not be distributed or reproduced without the written consent of Water Tower Research and should not be considered research nor recommendation. WTR is an investor engagement firm and not a licensed broker, broker-dealer, market maker, investment banker, underwriter, and investment advisor. Additional disclaimers can be found at watertowerresearch.com.